Hey, what's going on, guys? At the UFC 297 post-fight presser, Dana White basically gave away what his plans were for the UFC 300 main event, which is set to be announced sometime this week, which he said next week. And we're going to take a look at those clips because I feel like they didn't get enough attention from the UFC post-fight presser. And also, since we're covering Dana White's post-fight presser in this video, I want to discuss some delusional things Dana White said about the Movsar Evloev Arnold Allen fight, because I felt like that wasn't a video on its own. And we're also going to take a look at what he said about UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia. But the main topic of this video is going to be the UFC 300 main event. Because when it's announced, and I believe I know exactly what it is, it's not that hard to figure out. It's not that hard to read between the lines of what Dana said. But I believe it's going to expose a massive hypocrisy within the MMA community. And I'm going to call that out in this video as well. So we're going to start off a little bit out of order. We're going to start off with UFC Saudi Arabia. Because he's asked about UFC Saudi Arabia, which was announced for March 2nd. It has recently been changed. Now it's going to be sometime in June. And the March 2nd card has become a UFC Apex card. Let's listen to what he has to say when he's asked about it.
And last one outside tonight's event, there was reports that the Saudi event's been pushed back to June. I'm curious if that's true. And what about the reports where it was because of a disagreement over the card?
Total bullshit. That's a straight out fucking lie. I don't know who started it or how it started, but
he knows exactly who started it. Let me explain to you guys, and one day I need to make an entire video on this. Dana White hates Ariel Helwani's guts. And he hates him so much that it's not beyond the realm of possibility for the UFC to shift plans based on Ariel Helwani reports. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened here, but Dana White basically takes credit for building Ariel Helwani up. In his mind, he takes credit because of Ariel's previous relationship with the UFC. And because they've kind of gone their separate ways and Dana White really doesn't like him, he takes every opportunity in an attempt to discredit him and tear him down by making different reports he reports to look non-credible. That's Dana White's whole point here. So he knows exactly who started it, and that's why he really doubles and triples down on, oh, I don't know who did it, but they're a liar. Listen, we'll listen to some more.
not one fight was announced to Saudi.
Not one fight was announced for Saudi.
One fight was announced to him.
Okay, so here's the UFC March 2nd card, the Fight Night card, which, you know, these fights were confirmed. Okay, you can look at some of the card. Alex Perez, Muhammad Makayev, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Shamil Gaziv. You know, you go down the card some more. You have Javid Basharat versus Ayman Zahabi, Mohamed Yahya versus Brendan Moreau. And again and again and again, you see a lot of these Muslim fighters. Now, you have 9 fights officially confirmed for this card. These fights have been confirmed, whether through managers or fighters. UFC Saudi Arabia was already confirmed for March 2nd, so therefore these fights were confirmed for Saudi Arabia. Whether the UFC called up Saudi Arabia and said, look, here's the fights that we're going to put on, I mean, we're just arguing semantics. There's fights that have been confirmed for that date. That date has been confirmed for Saudi Arabia, so therefore that card has been confirmed. Now, in his defense, there's only 9 fights announced. Usually there's 12 to 14 fights per card. But it's just crazy how Dana White has to spin the narrative with literal semantics. But we'll continue listening.
I called and asked to push the card back. Yeah.
That just shows it's all an ego thing. At the end of the day, the card wasn't good enough for Saudi Arabia, and the card had to be moved. So that's a fact.
Because we had a couple of guys that we want on the card, and they weren't ready.
Now, I believe that's most likely true. But at the end of the day, it's not beyond the realm of possibility for the UFC to just say, oh, we'll sell wolf tickets. You know, this fight card's great anyway. You know, look at all these, you know, homegrown names. You know, these Muslim fighters we have on the card. Shamil Gaziv, always going to be incredible. They're going to try to sell wolf tickets to Saudi Arabia, but it's not going to fly with Saudi Arabia. It might fly with random states throughout, you know, America and whatnot. Might fly with Canada. It might fly with Australia. Saudi Arabia is paying them like $20 million just to come there. It's not going to fly with them.
So, listen, you know how we are. We want to deliver. And if we're going to Saudi Arabia at the level that these guys do things, and it's a fight night, but we want to make it the best fight night we've ever done. So anybody who came out and said it was because the card wasn't good is a fucking liar.
So there you go. Whoever came out with that is a fucking liar. We all know he knows. Look at that look. Look at that shit-eating grin he's got on his face right now. it's just because he wants to discredit Ariel Helwani. At the end of the day, Ariel Helwani reported the card was being moved. He reported the card was inadequate. Both those things are true. If Dana White wants to say, well, I'm the one that made the final call, it's just an ego thing at this point. The card was moved because it was inadequate. Now, that wasn't that bad, but I just wanted to call it out because it made no sense. Oh, we didn't propose a single fight to them, even though you had 9 fights announced for that date. That date was then confirmed for Saudi Arabia. But the next thing we're going to look at, and we're going a little bit out of order, and I'll link this entire post-fight down in the description if you want to go check out the whole thing. It's about 23 minutes. But he's asked about Movsar Evloev versus Arnold Allen. And I could not believe what he said here. And I'm still wondering, is he confused? Because there was a little bit confusion. You'll see the tail end of it here. He initially thought they were talking about Neil Magny, but then he realized they're talking about Allen versus Evloev. And Dana White makes some completely ridiculous comments here.
About Movsar Evloev against Arnold Allen, that fight.
I thought you were talking about Neil Magny. All right. Yeah. I mean, what's his win streak like? He's on.
I think he's like 18, 19.
Yeah, 18 or 19. And
by the way, I believe the original question was Movsar was tired of being called like a decision machine because his fights are exciting, something along those lines. I don't remember exactly what the question was, but just to kind of give you context.
Yeah, that place sucked the wind right out of that fight sucked the wind right out of the arena tonight. So.
That wasn't even the worst fight on the main card. There's 5 fights that was the second best fight on the card. Arnold Allen, Movsar Evloev was an incredible fight. I enjoyed it. It wasn't the greatest fight ever. It wasn't a Yuri Prochazka Glover Teixeira. That was an incredible fight. That was probably the second best fight on the main card. I mean, the main event, because it's for a title, obviously feels bigger. You could make a case that Movsar Evloev Arnold Allen was a better fight. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but you get my point. It was nowhere near bad. Nowhere near bad, even compared to the rest of the card, let alone the entire history of fights, which he gets to in a second, which is crazy to me.
So it might bum him out, but he's got to deal with it. Yeah, that was the least fun fight anybody's ever seen. So he doesn't have much to complain about. You know who lost that fight? The fans.
I mean, how was that fight boring at all? That fight was, you had incredible scrambles in the first round. You had Movsar rocking Arnold Allen in the second round. You had scrambles in the third round. You had illegal knees in the third round. You had crazy elbows where Movsar was on the back of Arnold Allen in the third round. It was a highly competitive fight, a elite level fight. You had crazy scrambles, great striking, people getting hurt on the feet. What was there not to love about that fight? I mean, what is this guy? Is he a casual? I don't understand. Well, he was probably too busy staring at his phone, probably posting power slap advertisements on the UFC's official Instagram. Because I don't get that. I don't understand if he's confused or what. But this wasn't something I was going to make an entire dedicated video on. So I figured, you know what? I'm talking about the post-fight here. Let me squeeze that into this video. I think that is completely ridiculous. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Am I crazy? Or was Movsar Evloev versus Arnold Allen an incredible fight? I really enjoyed it. Again, not the greatest fight ever, but I thought it was a very good, fun, competitive, elite level fight. Now, let's move on to UFC 300. Now, let's set the stage with some context from early in the presser where he's asked about a potential immediate rematch for Sean Strickland because Sean Strickland lost via split decision. Let's listen to his response to this. Because in the next clip we're going to look at in a second, he basically confirms what the main event of UFC 300 will be.
What do you want to do with Sean next?
I don't know. I mean, eventually these two are going to end up fighting again, I'm sure. But we're not thinking about an immediate rematch right now.
Okay.
So we're not looking at an immediate rematch. So the next middleweight title fight will not be Dricus Du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. Now, this reporter follows up and asks about UFC 300. And this is kind of setting the stage for something that he's then asked later as well.
Dricus did call for Israel Adesanya. I know that everyone asked you about the UFC 300 main event every day at this point, I'm sure. But is that something that could potentially happen?
I'll have UFC's 300's main event for you soon.
Give us a hint.
Huh?
Give me a hint.
No.
Okay.
So I'll have UFC 300's main event for you soon. And you see that shit-eating grin? He looks off at the page. Dana already knows what the UFC 300 main event's going to be. And I said for a month now, I thought he was potentially waiting for the UFC 297 main event to play out before he announced UFC 300's main event because they're trying to get this kind of mega compelling kind of fight as the main event for UFC 300, a spectacle main event. And I think he's asked follow-up questions later in the press conference, and he basically gives it away right here. He basically gives it away here. You can tell he already knows what the main event's going to be. And I'm going to break it down for you here in a second in layman's terms. And I'm going to break down to you why I can't wait to see the MMA community's hypocritical reaction to this. But let's listen.
But yeah, I mean, they're eventually going to fight.
Yeah, and as far as the middleweight title, you have Movsar Evloev out there tweeting to Dricus right now saying, see you at UFC 300. We know Dricus versus Adesanya is a huge fight too. What is going to be the process you guys take in figuring out what Dricus's next title defense will be? Because
by the way, I hate to sit here and applaud the MMA media, but when other MMA media members are asking, what's the vibe? Great question. Great follow-up question. And you can see Dana's already kind of thinking, all right, how do I avoid this question and give him a non-answer? But let's listen.
those are obviously both huge fights.
We'll figure this out Tuesday.
So that tells you right there, we're going to figure this out Tuesday. He was specifically asked about the middleweight title. We're going to figure this out Tuesday. Since when an event and title changes hands on a Saturday, are they figuring it out the following Tuesday? That already gives it away right there that he's planning on the UFC 300 main event being for the middleweight title. But listen, there's a follow-up question about Israel Adesanya.
We'll probably announce it next week.
So we'll figure it out we'll figure it out Tuesday. It's only Saturday. We'll figure it out in 3 days, and we'll probably announce it next week. So if he's figuring out the middleweight title on Tuesday and he's announcing it this week, that has to be the main event for UFC 300, which he's followed up even more and asked about as well.
Do you know what Izzy's availability is? Is he trying to fight again this year?
Do I know?
Israel Adesanya, like, is he looking to come back sooner than...
By the way, I don't want to be some body language expert, but when Dana's asked questions he doesn't necessarily want to answer, he has a propensity to cover his face and really like think about it. And you can see the shit-eating grin hiding underneath his hand right now. And you'll see it in a second when he takes it down. But he's asked, what is Israel Adesanya's kind of return table?
And later, do you know?
We'll find out next week.
Okay, thank you.
So there you go. There you go. Right there from Dana White. We're going to figure out the middleweight title next week, and we're going to figure out Israel Adesanya's availability next week. That basically gives it away right there. No matter what, and we don't need to have this on the screen anymore. No matter what, we know that Dricus Du Plessis will be defending his title most likely at UFC 300, barring some injury we don't know about. Dricus Du Plessis says UFC 300 sounds amazing. So that only, and he already said earlier in the video, there will be no immediate rematch for Sean Strickland. So that leaves us with two options, Movsar Evloev or Israel Adesanya. And I believe the UFC 300 main event will be Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. And the UFC already let it slip through their fingers twice because of poor planning with Dricus versus Robert Whittaker and then wanting him to do a quick turnaround at UFC 293. And then Sean Strickland getting the title fight. And I talked about it when that fight was announced. I hated that fight because Strickland didn't deserve a title shot. And then now if he wins, we lose Adesanya versus Du Plessis. The UFC isn't going to let this mega fight slip through their fingers twice. You have Israel Adesanya, a former champion who is a superstar in the UFC's eyes, who's not a Conor McGregor draw, but he's actually a draw. You know, I know people throw around that term a lot, but he's actually a draw. And then you have undefeated Dricus Du Plessis. Then you have all the background of who's the true African and whatnot. The UFC is not going to let that slip through their fingers twice. And it's just crazy to me. He basically gave it away right there. So we'll figure it out this Tuesday and we'll announce it this week. That means I already believe going into this fight, I have reason to believe they were planning on the winner of this fight, whether it was Strickland or Du Plessis, they were planning on doing them versus Israel Adesanya for the UFC 300 main event, which I know a lot of people, I've already seen people complaining, Israel Adesanya doesn't deserve a title shot. Why should he get a title shot without having to win a fight? And I would partially agree with those people. Actually, I would fully agree with those people that he does not deserve a title fight. This is your fault. This is your fault. And this isn't obviously directed at everyone, but the point I'm trying to make here, this is the MMA community's fault. You're okay with undeserved title shots when it's fighters you don't like getting screwed over. I couldn't believe the amount of people saying, Israel Adesanya doesn't deserve a title shot. He just lost to Strickland. Why should he get an immediate title shot when he hasn't won a fight? But yet, they're then campaigning for Sean Strickland to get an immediate rematch with Dricus Du Plessis. Sean Strickland didn't even deserve the title fight at UFC 293. So, my question is, and for me, 100%, I want a meritocracy. I do not want to hear you say that Israel Adesanya does not deserve a title shot unless you were campaigning for Jarrett Cannonier to get a title shot. That is the only way I will accept that argument, because the same people who are saying Israel Adesanya doesn't deserve a title shot, the reason I say it's your fault, it is your fault that he's getting a title shot, is because guess what? You were, oh, Colby Covington's a draw, give Colby a shot. It's okay when Bilal Muhammad gets screwed over. Oh, yes, oh, yeah, make Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera too. It's okay when Merab Dvalishvili gets screwed over for his earned title shot. But now all of a sudden, a fighter that you don't like may get a little bit of a Dana White privilege. All of a sudden, no, they don't deserve a title shot. And also they're saying, oh, Khamzat doesn't deserve a title shot. He only beat Kamaru Usman. Now, I would agree. I don't think Khamzat Chimaev has earned a title shot. I don't think Israel Adesanya has earned a title shot. But what my argument to you would be, there's not some clear-cut deserving number one contender. I think the most deserving fighter on the middleweight, in the middleweight division right now, is Jarrett Cannonier. It should be Dricus Du Plessis versus Jarrett Cannonier. Sean Strickland never defended his belt. He beat a guy who isn't even UFC caliber to get a title shot. And he caught lightning in the bottle. He beat Israel Adesanya. And then he lost his very next fight. I don't care if it was a split decision. Stop crying robbery with every decision you disagree with just because you like the fighter that lost, okay? But you guys have to be consistent. It's your fault because you've given the UFC green light over and over and over again. And I've complained and I've complained and I've complained that this is a slippery slope. And next thing you know, we're giving WWE superstars title shots. And everyone's like, Joey, lighten up. It's business. It's business. They're a pay-per-view draw. Well, guess what? Israel Adesanya is a big pay-per-view draw. He's not a Conor McGregor. I'm not saying he's a Brock Lesnar. But Israel Adesanya is a pay-per-view draw. Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya is a pay-per-view draw. And I do think there is an argument to make that Israel Adesanya, a long-reigning champ, I know he lost his belt to Alex Pereira. He was winning that fight, got clipped, got finished, came back and won the title in a dominant fashion, okay? He lost the belt against Sean Strickland. Fair enough. Maybe he had an off night. You can make that argument. You can make that case. I'm not necessarily making that case. But Dricus Du Plessis, Israel Adesanya is a compelling fight. And there's not a guy on a 10-fight win streak that is getting skipped over for Israel Adesanya. Basically, you have Jarrett Cannonier right now, who deserves it more than Israel Adesanya. But guess what? Israel Adesanya has a win over him not that long ago. It's not that, that recent, but not that long ago. So there's really no clear-cut case for Sean Strickland to get a shot. There's no clear-cut case for Israel Adesanya to get a shot. There's no clear-cut case for Khamzat Chimaev to get a shot, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to have the biggest complaints for Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title because there's not somebody getting skipped over clearly. But what happens is a lot of you guys have approved the UFC doing this time and time again. And now that because of what you guys want and you guys have allowed to happen, because at the end of the day, fan narrative and fan pushback does help guide the UFC to a certain extent. And all of you guys constantly screaming, well, they're a draw, they're a draw. And I've cried about this nonstop. Since when do you get a cut of pay-per-view revenue? When do you get a cut of pay-per-view revenue? But now that it benefits, the draw argument benefits a fighter you do not like, you want to cry and whine about it. So I'm looking forward to seeing Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title. Does Adesanya necessarily deserve it? No, he doesn't. But he's not skipping over a clear-cut number one contender. I'm looking forward to this fight. I believe it will be announced this week. That's why I wanted to make this video, even though I'm deathly sick right now. So if you guys could do me a favor, like this video, share this video, comment down below, and let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.